Krista Brown, also from ChildVoice, and as you know, the last few weeks we've been talking about how we're building towards our grant raising goal, and so tonight I'm going to do a little interview to give all of us a chance to hear what they're up to and a bit of how our grant and our donations day after day for coffee, milkshakes, and tea and things will help put an end to human trafficking. So looking forward to hearing from you guys.
I'm going to let you sit down there for a minute. I'm going to take the church. I'm going to do a little story to start with.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to need a volunteer. I'm looking for one of the youngest women in the room. So
I'm 5.
Okay. Anybody 18? Any girls 18? Younger than 18? So, I need a volunteer. So anybody, come on up. I'm going to call on somebody if you don't want to. You be my volunteer tonight? Come on.
Yeah!
What's your name?
Keely.
Kaylee?
Keely.
Keely.
Yeah.
All right. So, I want you guys to kind of put your computers away for a minute, put your phones down, and I want us to take a moment and we're going to listen to a bit of a story and we're just going to visualize this. And Keely's going to be the character in our story. So Keely, imagine you're a young girl living in South Sudan. You're one of 6 daughters in a culture where girls are not valued. Your father died when you were young, and your mother's old and sick. She was unable to take care of the family. You had to leave school because your family couldn't afford to pay the fees anymore. You're desperate for food, trying to find anything at all to be able to bring to the family. You fall prey to a man in the streets and become pregnant, making you even more vulnerable than you were before. Your country has erupted in a civil war, and it's no longer safe to stay. You are forced to flee for your life and for the life of your child. You walk for days and days and days, barefoot with your baby on your back. You have no food, you have no water. People that are walking alongside you are dying. You can see them along the side of the road, the dead bodies. You're afraid to sleep at night because of the ambushes that happen. You're scared for your life and for your child. You finally make it to the refugee camps in Uganda, only to find poor living conditions and very meager provisions. Then, you hear of an organization called ChildVoice. Finally, you see a light at the end of the dark tunnel that you've been living in. This is a true story of a teenager named Betty and her little baby named Esther. Betty and Esther came to ChildVoice and attended the program there, and for the first time in her life, she had hope for a new future. So let's hear more about ChildVoice.
I don't know about you, but they got me already. I'm super pumped about this grant opportunity. Before we jump into the interview, ChildVoice had an office in this building a number of years ago, and you guys may not know this, but your kind of collaboration of passion, community, faith, and initiative to bring change into the world was deeply inspiring for me and helped set me on a path for being a part of founding the Freedom Cafe. So I'm really excited that we have the chance to give back to you in this way and support the great work that you're doing. So Conrad, maybe help us understand a little bit more about how war makes kids vulnerable to human trafficking.
Well, I think in the story that you just heard from Krista, which is actually a true story, you begin to understand that years and years of war oftentimes result in massive amounts of displacement. In fact, today, there's over 65 million people that are displaced around the world because of armed conflict. And 28 million of those are children. So you can only imagine in the situation that Krista just talked about, a girl like this is vulnerable. She's desperate to take care of herself and the family. Might start to engage in what we call survival sex to try and raise money for food. And brothels pop up. You know, they become places where these girls hang out, begin to sell themselves for sex. One of the things that we see in war is you put a weapon in the hands of a guy, that power gives him the ability to manipulate and traffic women and girls. In many cases, like in South Sudan right now, the military has not been paid in months. And so these guys are marauding across the landscape, taking advantage of women and girls to try and replace the money that they're not being paid for their. So all in all, it's a desperate place, and I think that traffickers are finding ways to take advantage of that.
You're kind of already getting into this with the scale and the number of people displaced, but how big of a problem are we talking about?
Well, I mean, just start with the number of 28 million kids. Many of them, because of war, find themselves orphaned or partially orphaned. They're displaced from their homes. They're living in places that they don't know. They're easily taken advantage of. And one of the things that we commonly think about trafficking as sex trafficking, and that's sort of the framework in which we think of trafficking. In conflict areas, trafficking can happen within and without conflict, the conflict zone itself. And what I mean by that is that in the scenario that Krista just described, you have a girl who's first of all trying to take care of the family that she has there, and then when the situation gets bad, she gets displaced and she moves out. Now she's in an unknown area, she's by herself. She doesn't have anybody to take care of her, and she begins to make bad decisions, and oftentimes is trafficked. We also know that groups like the Lord's Resistance Army, the LRA, Boko Haram are trafficking girls. They're abducting girls, trafficking girls, and using them as not only sex slaves but armed combatants as well. We also are aware of in Nigeria, where we've just started to work, that because of the conflict, kids are trying to flee that to find a place of safe haven. Traffickers are setting up shops where they're telling these kids, if you come with me, I'll take you to Europe, you'll get a job as a domestic there. And, they get caught in that trap where they become now the slaves of their traffickers. So, just the situation that we've talked about where the issue of displacement alone can create such high vulnerability in kids.
Yeah, it's powerful. What are you guys doing to address this huge problem?
Well, we focused on adolescent girls for actually the 12 years that we've been in existence, because we felt like they were the most vulnerable of all these kids. Now, boys are vulnerable as well, but not in the same way that girls are. And I think in a lot of these cultures where we work, girls aren't valued in the same way that boys are, so they don't have the same opportunities that boys have. They oftentimes leave school much earlier than boys do. And that puts them in a place where they're oftentimes entering into arranged child marriages, and become actually maybe the third or fourth wife of a guy, and they literally are living in enslavement than the rest of their life. So what we've tried to do is to set up safe havens, sanctuaries where these girls can come. And we've had our flagship program is in northern Uganda, where we've got space for 48 girls and their kids. They can come and live there. well they're healing from the trauma.
Is that unique that you have a space for the girls and their children?
Very unique.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not aware of anybody else that's doing that.
Yeah.
So we take girls that are pregnant, that already have children, or are at risk of
I
becoming
know
pregnant.
even in the States, that's a challenge for a lot of the safe homes and aftercare centers to have trauma care, support systems, and children included in that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of anybody else that's doing it, but our goal was to keep the family together. And even though most of these kids were born out of rape or defilement, our goal was that for that kid to have a chance, that mom needed to learn to love that kid and needed to learn how to raise that kid as if it were someone that she valued. And so that's part of our goal in a place like that, is that they come to learn to appreciate their kids and really set up the next generation.
So you mentioned a little bit, specifically the Sudan student coming in, and I know in our talks there's a huge refugee camp in northern Uganda, and you're just beginning to do some work there. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, the refugee camp, and what you're doing to help vulnerable women in that area?
So again, when you look at our flagship program, the Lokoni Center in northern Uganda, and we've had, over the course of 10 years, going on 11 now, we've had about 160 girls go through that program, and about 230 some other little ones go through. That's just a fraction of the need. We have hundreds of girls that apply for every bed that we ever build. So when this massive group of refugees started to flood into northern Uganda, there's over 1 million now from South Sudan that are now living in northern Uganda. And just in the one camp that we're working in right now, which is about 130,000 people, and they've come in the last year, based on our research, there's over 28,000 adolescent girls in that population who are either pregnant, have children, or at risk of becoming pregnant. We realized we didn't have enough room at our center to bring girls like that there, so we set up a community-based intervention in the camps where we're going to set up girl empowerment centers where these girls can come during the day if they're not in school. They can get the counseling, the trauma healing, the vocational training, the social activities that are not there for them right now. With the goal that at some point they are going to be able to move through the trauma and the displacement and all the issues related to that, begin to get life skills and vocational skills that will allow them to take care of themselves and their children.
Yeah, I know Krista was telling me a little bit about some folks are pooling things together to try to get a garden plot in the refugee camp and helping create opportunities for people to grow their own food and maybe even sell food. Some of these really practical needs that will help serve and even beyond the folks that you are directly serving.
Well, and I think what's really important to think about is that in refugee situations like this, right now the World Food Program is only able to take care of about 30% of the needs. Every month we're hearing that they're cutting food rations to the refugees. We had 15 containers of food that were offered to us to bring in. The Ugandan government told us that if we brought it in, they were going to charge us $60,000 per container because of the value of the food, and we were going to be charged as if it were a commercial venture. We fought that for months, trying to figure out how we could get exemptions to be able to bring in this food. Finally, we gave up and said, how much better would it be if we can bring these girls together to work as groups and farm larger plots of land, raise all the food that they need for their families, and the excess they'd be able to sell as an income generating activity.
Yeah.
So we're not a relief organization, and so it's not our goal to be able to just give and then think about where is it going to come for the next day. Our goal is to help create capacity so that they can take care of themselves.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one of the things that I love about
Teach a
your
girl to fish.
organization. Yeah, yeah. So we got to kind of wrap things up here. But how can we, if people aside from buying coffee and tea and helping support this grant, want to be involved in other things that ChildVoice is doing, how can they get involved?
Well, there's a couple ways that would be really applicable, I think, to your age group, and one of them is to go on a trip with us. We take trips several times a year. It's different than most trips you take. You're able to come to our center, live, and do life with these girls. I mean, what better way to learn how people are overcoming trafficking and overcoming the abuse that they've experienced. You live in a hut, you eat with them, you build relationships with them, and then you come home and you spread that message to other people. The other way is through internships. We have a large amount of college students that come over and do internships with us. You can tailor it and design it to your own, interests. It can be 3 months, it can be a year. It just depends on what you're interested in and your time frame available. And you get credit for it. So we're going to have information back there if you want to learn more about internships. We've got information about internships and trips. I highly encourage you. And there's a lot of UNH students that have gone over. So I had a really amazing experience. And everybody says, oh, it's a life-changing experience. Well, I got to go in November. It's a life-changing experience. I've never experienced anything like this place, and
How long have you been working with ChildVoice before that?
2 years.
So 2 years working, and then you went
And I knew, ChildVoice
yeah.
is great, I love it, I know what we're doing, but to step out of the van on the Lacombe Center property and to see what that place is like and feel the peace and to meet these girls and to build those relationships, it was incredible.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and thank you to our community.
Thank you.